The Other Side of the Sun by Madeleine L'Engle, 2:1. They were here on the veranda waiting for me when I finally reached Illyria. The four women. Honoria, tall, powerful, purple-black. The two old great-aunts, small and pale. Aunt Irene, half the age of the other three. But when one is 19, middle age is old. Honoria stood calmly beside the others, twittering like birds. Palm leaf fans flutter and rose to greet me. Aunt Irene held out her plump hands. "Stella! It is Stella, isn't it?" "Who else would it be?" one of the old ladies whispered. I felt the eyes of all four probing me. I was being measured, judged. I smiled brightly to hide my discomfort. "Stella, honey, welcome to Illyria. I'm your Aunt Irene." She drew me to her. Her voice was bright pink crushed velvet, and she smelled of heliotrope. She called herself Aunt Irene, and probably because I was so keyed up, I almost giggled. "And this is your great-aunt Mary Dinsborough and your great-aunt Olivia." The two old ladies moved forward. Unlike Aunt Irene, who looked like a fashion plate, they were dressed in rusty and old-fashioned clothes, with their hair parted in the middle and their ears poking out in the fashion I learned later, which had been popular during the war. "Welcome, child," one of them pecked me on the cheek. "We welcome the new Mrs. Theron Rainier. I am Aunt Mary Dinsborough." "And I am Aunt Olivia," the other lady said, and reached to kiss me. She smelled lightly of lemon and lavender. The old gray-watered silk of her dress rustled as she moved, and her voice was like it, a dry, gentle rustling. Clive, Ronnie," Aunt Irene called. "Oh, there you are. Please see that Miss Stella's things are taken to her room so the Honoria can unpack them." The old colored woman moved to me. There was something majestic about her. She took my hands in her very strong ones and looked into my face. I felt like a child instead of a married woman. "We welcome you, Miss Stella." This, then, was Honoria. I knew that Honoria was important. Immediately after Mado's death, it was Honoria who saw to it that her ring came to my Terry for his bride. The Rainier ring. Touching that ring got me through a lot of bad times. Not that I thought it had any magical properties, although I was to find that many people did indeed believe this. It was just that the ring always made me know who I was, Mrs. Theron Rainier. I touched it now, a heavy ring made of two beautifully etched gold serpents, entwined like those on a caduceus, with rubies for eyes. It came to Mado from Honoria. Terry had told me when he first showed it to me the night he asked me to be his wife. Mado, my grandmother, Marguerite Dominique de la Valeur Rainier. She was always called Mado. And Honoria? He hesitated. "I suppose you might call her Mado's housekeeper. I loved her almost as much as I loved Mado, maybe as much, because they belonged together. My husband, of all the Rainier men, was the one who was most full of laughter, but when he took the ring out of its velvet box to give it to me, he was totally serious. 'It carries a responsibility,' he said, 'a responsibility of healing. The serpent isn't always a symbol of evil. You remember that twined serpent is the doctor's emblem, and my grandfather Theron was a doctor. Dr. Theron, his young son, there met Mado, loved and won, but lost the war between the states.' I looked at the ring, fingering the rubies. How would a housekeeper get hold of a ring like this? Honoria was born in Africa, Terry said, as though that explained everything. Honoria withdrew to the side of the veranda, and Aunt Irene fluttered about me. "Sit down, honey. You must be exhausted. Was it a terrible, terrible trip?" I didn't know what she meant, whether she meant the ocean voyage or the long drive from Jefferson to Illyria, so I just said, "It was beautiful," and sat in the rocking chair Honoria pulled up for me. Aunt Olivia, moving with difficulty, lowered herself into her chair. She was crippled with rheumatism. A silver-handled cane lay on the floor by her chair. Honoria will bring you something to cool you off. I can see that you need it. Livia, Aunt Mary Dinsborough reprimanded. But it must have been wholly obvious that I was hot, wrinkled, and travel-worn. Stella isn't used to the heat, Aunt Olivia said, and smiled at me with eyes faded to a soft kitten's blue. Everything about her was a little faded. Her ash-blonde hair was the color of bleached sand. Her skin was soft and finely wrinkled. The once rich material of her grey moire dress was faded too. They have snow in England, don't you, Stella? Yes, but not in summer. Here, lovey, this will help. Aunt Olivia handed me a large fan made of palm fronds. Aunt Mary Dinsborough and Aunt Irene were slowly swishing similar fans back and forth against the sluggish air. Honoria reached behind one of the shutters and brought out another fan for Aunt Olivia. The old lady nodded her thanks. What do we have to give Stella, Honoria? Do we have some sangaree? Aunt Mary Dinsborough sat down briskly, though I guessed her to be the elder of the two old ladies. Her voice was disapproving, rusty brown like her dress. She looked, I thought, like a little brown owl. Livia, you know Hoadley doesn't like us to imbibe anything with spirits until he arrives. Her dress might be frumpy and out of style, but her fingers bore two magnificent rings, and the pendants which hung from her ears were, I was sure, real pearls. Sangaree is hardly spirits, Aunt Olivia said. I'm sure Hoadley wouldn't object. Her gnarled and twisted little fingers could not support rings, but the throat of her dress was fastened with a superb brooch. Hoadley was Aunt Irene's husband. It was Uncle Hoadley and Aunt Irene who had taken Terry into their home after his parents were drowned in a boating accident. I think she'd like some strawberries, Aunt Olivia said. Don't you think Stella'd like some strawberries, Des? Strawberries and cream. Strawberries aren't in season, Aunt Olivia snorted. Does it? Strawberries and cream taste even cooler than sangaree. How about a little claret lemonade? Aunt Irene suggested. But, Aunt Mary Dinsborough demurred. I wanted something special to welcome Stella, Aunt Olivia said. I wish we had some strawberries. If wishes were horses, Aunt Mary Dinsborough stated. Beggars would ride, Aunt Olivia finished. Anyhow, that doesn't count, Des. We're playing Shakespeare today, and in any case, just because thou art virtuous, shall there be no more cakes and ale? 12th night, Sir Toby Belch, point for me. You'd have been pretty silly if you hadn't identified that one. What about figs? There's nothing nicer on a hot day than a cool bowl of figs and cream. Livia, Aunt Mary Dinsborough pursed her lips. You know perfectly well the fig tree hasn't borne since the year Mado died. Virtue, Aunt Olivia cried, undaunted. A fig. 'Tis in ourselves that we are thus. Or thus our bodies are our gardens, to which our wills are gardeners. Shakespeare, of course, Aunt Mary Dinsborough huddled into herself in thought, so that she looked more owlish than ever. I know. Othello. Does it? Aunt Olivia said. Stop swearing. I just said Daz. That's not a swear word. I made it up myself. You made it up to use as a swear word. But it isn't one. You can't scold me for it. Daz it, Des. Livia. Miss Olivia? Honoria said softly, sternly. That is enough. Daz, anyhow. Hush! Honoria held up her large, strong hand. Night black on the back, soft wrinkled pink on the palm, and the insides of the fingers. Hush and listen. The two old ladies in the rocking chairs leaned forward, suddenly alert as seagulls. I listened too. I heard the wind rustle in the palms with a sound like paper. I heard the soft slur of the sea against sand. That was all. What? Aunt Mary Dinsborough asked impatiently. The wind has changed, Aunt Olivia cried. That means the storm tonight will cool things off. That'll be nice for you, Stella. I hope the storm will come soon. There isn't much time. Time for what? Aunt Mary Dinsborough asked crossly. Don't sound silly. Don't raise your voice. It's not polite. That time when thou shalt strangely pass, and scarcely greet me with the sun, thine eye. Oh, something obscure like Titus Andronicus, I suppose. It is not, it's the sonnets. Point for me. You're losing your memory. Aunt Irene chided. Are you sure the fig tree didn't bear this year? Aunt Olivia asked. Now who's losing her memory? There are people, Aunt Olivia said, who can make fig trees bear. If you remember, Aunt Mary Dinsborough said with heavy emphasis, that particular fig tree did not bear, and it got blighted. So that was only one fig tree. What about all the others? I managed to get a word in. What I would really like is a cup of tea and then to change out of these clothes into something cool. Honoria moved quietly across the veranda, opened the screen door, and went into the house. Now, I call that a sensible suggestion, Aunt Mary Dinsborough said approvingly. And we will pause there.